everyone, and welcome to the 4th Annual Vendor Scholar Lecture, brought to you as part of the yearly programming in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. I'm Elizabeth Dunn, proud Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and we're very happy to see all of you here this evening. This lecture series is in honor of Eileen and Harvey Bender, two outstanding scholars and teachers. Harvey, as many of you will know, taught in the sciences. He was a geneticist at Notre Dame. And Eileen is a humanist, was a humanist in the English department here at IUSB. It was a great marriage and a great partnership. And they did a lot, not just for IUSB and Notre Dame, but for the state of Indiana and the region in general. They're very proud and happy when their children decided to set up a fund to endow the series at IUSB. And we remain very grateful to Leslie, Philip, and Sam Bender, who unfortunately had an unexpected death in the family and could not be here this evening. We are, however, very fortunate to have a close family and friend, who many of you in the community may know. Dr. Posey, where are you? There she is over there. We're really happy to have her here with us this evening. And we'll hear a bit more about the Benders when the Chancellor makes a few remarks. As you can see on the back of your program, if you take a look at the back of your program, we've been accumulating a distinguished list of guests, speakers here at IUSB, including a Nobel laureate, a best-selling novelist, and a nationally known mathematician and artist. Tonight's guest, Dr. Thomas Frank, is a historian and public intellectual and continues our tradition of excellence and lively engagement in the series, and I know he will provoke thoughtful discussion and interest, but more on that when he's introduced. I also want to mention that we lost our good friend and wonderful artist, Harold Zisla, this past year. Every year, the Bender materials have been graced with one of Harold's paintings that he did in honor of the Benders, and if you look at your program, there's a detail of that painting on the front of this program. In addition, the Benders gave us their collection of Zislas for the college, and several of them are hanging in the Dean's Suite upstairs where students can see it, so it's all glass in the front. And you're welcome to come up and enjoy those anytime. But to make sure that people could see a few of them this evening, we brought 3 down and you saw them out at the reception. So please stop by on your way out and have another look at our Zislas. We're very proud and happy to have those paintings. We want to continue to build the Bender Scholar Fund and hope someday to have a full scholar in residence program, including a significantly longer stay on campus to interact with our students, teach classes, work with the community, and give a series of public lectures. Many others in South Bend have contributed to the fund, and we're thankful for their generosity in adding to the original Bender gift. This fund also supports a student Bender Scholarship winner. The Bender Scholar for this year is Louis Fuerte. And Louis, would you stand up, please, and be recognized? This scholarship is quite an honor, and Louis has excelled as a biology major and is also completing a triple minor in psychology, chemistry, and math. So if you're not impressed with this young man, I'm not sure what it is. He serves as a teaching assistant in anatomy and physiology classes, and he plans to attend medical school after he graduates. He has demonstrated the kind of serious commitment to scholarship in the sciences, as well as a campus leadership. So we really congratulate him as the 2016 Bender Scholar. And finally, I want to recognize Linda Schultz-Heydrich, who's Linda in the room. She's in the back there. I think I see her. Nick Wirt and Lee Kahn down here in the front. They did you would be amazed at how many logistics are involved in organizing a reception lecture and a 2.5-day visit from a scholar. So please help me thank them for. And now I would like to introduce our Chancellor, Dr. Perry Allison, who along with Vice Chancellor Dr. Eileen Shepard will make a presentation and a few remarks, and they will be followed then by Dr. Jonathan Nishalvaran, who's our speaker. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. I'm honored to be with you all this evening. As Chancellor, I have a great appreciation for the people who established the foundation of this wonderful university, Indiana University South Bend, and I feel an obligation to honor their memories and build upon their good work and service. Eileen Bender was one of those people. She and her husband, Harvey, represented the best of higher education in their scholarship, their teaching, their engagement with students and the community. The Bender Scholar in Residence Lecture is the perfect way to honor them. Students, faculty, and community residents have a unique opportunity each year to learn and grow because of the generosity of the Bender family. He will be formally introduced just afterwards, but I do want to take this opportunity to thank Thomas Frank for being with us this evening and his very busy election season. As I was saying beforehand, I had to buy a blood pressure monitor, I think, this year, and I just can't wait to be healthy again after tonight. We're also here tonight to recognize the Bender family in another way. Each year, Indiana University honors selected benefactors by welcoming them into the President's Circle. It is IU's most prestigious donor recognition society. So we planned on making this presentation to members of the family tonight, but as you heard, they were unable to attend, but they've given us permission to go on with them in absentia. So I'm honored to proceed with the following, and then Vice Chancellor Shepherd, could you join me up here? The Bender siblings, Leslie, Samuel, and Philip, wish to honor the life work of their parents, Professors Eileen and Harvey Bender, distinguished multidisciplinary scholars in the humanities and sciences, who committed their lives to mentoring and encouraging students and colleagues. Their legacy empowers young scholars to extend their knowledge, explore new areas of research, and integrate life experience with their academic endeavors to further Indiana University South Bend's mission. Eileen committed nearly 30 years to improving IU South Bend and collaborated with administrators and faculty to prepare the campus for continued excellence. As you heard, Harvey was an adjunct professor at the IU School of Medicine in addition to his 52 years as a Notre Dame faculty member. Their gift is used to support undergraduate student scholarships and an annual faculty scholar or scholars in residence. The scholarship is awarded to a student enrolled in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences with a demonstrated record of continuing involvement in community service and leadership on campus. I'll say each about the three Bender children. Daughter Leslie Bender is the Vice President of Government Affairs and General Counsel. She just moved from San Diego to Miami. She speaks frequently and authors content on privacy, consumer financial protection, and other financial literacy and compliance topics. She is an avid hiker among her other accomplishments. Son Dr. Sam Bender is a board-certified OBGYN and a principal in the New York City-based Maternal Fetal Medicine Associates. Sam resides in New York City with his wife and two talented teenage daughters. Son Philip is the only native Hoosier Bender. He currently lives in Washington, D.C. Sadly, he just lost his spouse, but lives with his daughter, son, and dogs. He works as an independent technology consultant and volunteers to help neighborhood schools, support local elections, and plant trees. So Indiana University and IU South Bend are proud to welcome the Benders into the President's Circle. Let's acknowledge them with a round of applause.
Bender children will receive has this notation from Indiana University. In recognition of your extraordinary support, Indiana University and the Indiana University Foundation welcome you to the President's Circle. Established in 1992, the President's Circle honors our most generous donors. Through your support and commitment, Indiana University is better able to serve its students. Through your gifts, they develop their potential to serve humanity. Your leadership in securing the future success of Indiana University serves as an inspiration to us all. Please accept our deep appreciation and gratitude in posing
Hi, my name is Jonathan Nashell, and I teach in the history department. Thomas Frank is our generation's Ida Tarbell, Upton Sinclair, and Jacob Riis. And if you don't know who Ida Tarbell, Upton Sinclair, and Jacob Riis are, you take a history class. He's as enraged as those muckrakers were over the deep structural inequalities and crimes that infect our political system. But unlike his forebears, he makes me laugh. Mark Twain has tipped his hat at you from the great beyond, Tom. Tom seems to live by the motto that progressive hero and Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis said in 1914, how best to fix our political and economic wrongs. And one of the most famous lines from that book, he said, publicity is justly commended as a remedy for social and industrial diseases. Sunlight is said to be the best of disinfectants. Electric light, the most efficient policeman. Brandeis said this in, I imagine, Tom's all-time favorite book, Other People's Money, and How Bankers Use It. And so, quick question, how many copies of that book do you have?
I've been looking for a first edition for years. It's,
You will find it. We have to find you one. Tom came to the nation's attention with his instant classic in 2004, What's the Matter with Kansas? Here was a book that explained the rise of right-wing pseudo-populism, a book that married historical analysis with journalistic legwork. He detailed in funny and heartbreaking ways why the good citizens of Kansas, a state where he was born and raised, citizens who had benefited time and time again from our government's largesse, why these citizens were now voting for arch-conservative politicians who in turn enacted a host of laws that dismantled the very same safeguards that the citizens had benefited from. I should add that Tom's first book, The Conquest of Cool, is one of the best books I've read on the 60s, and students of mine, please close your ears, but I have borrowed extensively from that book. Also, if I can continue being a bit of a narcissist here, I'd like to tell you how Tom has made me a better teacher. In a 2008 column in the Wall Street Journal, entitled Welcome to Nixonland, Tom explained why conservatives were still railing against the 1960s, 40 years after that decade had ended. In this one column, he mentioned the following: Ken Kesey's Painted Bus, The Summer of Love, The Weathermen, The Young Americans for Freedom, Archie Bunker, Alger Hiss, and the Silent Majority. Seeing a proverbial teachable moment, I had my students read this column and then write about each of these named people or organizations. We're talking about ancient history to most of our students. Like biblical scholars, they tracked down the origins and mutations of each of these phrases. And when they reported back to their fellow students what they had uncovered, I just sat back and watched as they spoke with passion about how history had become part of the never-ending culture wars. So thank you, Tom, for helping me get such nice student evaluations. Now, in his most recent book, Listen Liberal, or Whatever Happened to the Party of the People, Tom has turned his eye toward the nature of the modern Democratic Party. It's a tale of compromise and mendacity. And without giving away too much, I can tell you that he's no fan of microloans or Martha's Vineyard. Venom toward Martha's Vineyard. I had to explain that all to my grad students. Tonight, we are very lucky to have Tom with us. He's here to help us make sense of the political mess that we are in, and more specifically, why Hillary Clinton's neo-liberalism leaves him so cold, why Bernie Sanders got such a raw deal, and what we should make of our present social condition, namely Donald Trump. Won't you all welcome Tom Frank.
I'm going to have trouble living up to that. You know, it's funny, I would write those Wall Street Journal columns. I was a columnist for the Wall Street Journal. Can you imagine that? And I would imagine that nobody read them. I just couldn't imagine anybody. And that is extraordinary that you had the kids look that up, because those are the sort of all the nouns that you mentioned there, all the proper nouns, Ken Kesey, Buzz, Alger Hiss, right? Those were the things that informed our lives back in the day. And it's good that you're. It's funny for me they're just natural, but it's good that you've got people studying it. And it is an honor to be here. It is so great to be here in Indiana, this vertical Kansas. I mean, writing about advertising and business and management theory and all that to what I do today, which is write about politics. And this year, folks, has turned out to be a great year to be someone who writes about politics from this kind of cynical perspective that I take nowadays. And what I thought we would talk about tonight, I mean, what I hope we wind up with when I'm done is the point where I want us to sort of wind up is talking about the two-party system and how it is something that I've come to understand just in the course of this year, how the two-party system itself, the structure of our system itself, is the origin of so many of the pathologies, right? So many of the things that are driving us crazy this year. And when I say driving us crazy, I mean like everyone. It's like we're stuck with, well, we'll get into that in a second. Two of the most unpopular presidential candidates of all time. In fact, the two most unpopular, since polling began. You know, how did this happen? Well, okay, but let's consider them in turn. Okay, the two candidates before us this year. Donald Trump. I mean, you can laugh him off if you want, but there is still because he is the nominee of one of our two major parties, there's a good chance that Donald Trump will be the next president of the United States. I mean, it's something that you would have thought impossible a year ago or 2 years ago, but there it is. And think about who he is, right? Think about this as the most unlikeliest presidential candidate of my lifetime, anyway. A man with no political experience of any kind, who has somehow persuaded himself that the way you run for the presidency is by going down the list of American ethnic groups and insulting them, each in turn, right? And then insulting them, cross-insulting them with other categories. It's like, insult them too, and right on down the list, handicapped people. And he talks constantly about representing working Americans, but himself knows very little about their actual situation, since, of course, as we all know, he comes from the most exalted reaches of the plutocracy, and in fact became famous on a TV show where he used to, do you remember this? He would fire people. That was the climactic point of the plot. The plot would develop and develop and develop, and then finally somebody would be seated in the room with him, and they'd be like, oh, please, no, Mr. Trump, and he'd be like, you fight. This is what this guy used to do. And he is profoundly unpopular, and I mean hated even, by millions of Americans, and the only reason that he has a chance at all to win is because the Democratic candidate is hated too, right? As I said, the two most unpopular presidential candidates since we have a modern understanding of what popularity is, running one against the other. So what are the chances of something like that happening? Not just one party nominating a profoundly unpopular choice figure, right? But both of them doing it at the same time. And both of them running, of course, right, entirely negative campaigns, with the Democrats saying, vote for Hillary because you can't have this guy Trump in the White House, and the Republicans chanting, lock her up, you know. And what's more, here's a weird fact. Up until fairly recently, the families of the two candidates were friends, right? Bill and Donald, would go tomcatting around or whatever it was. Chelsea and Ivanka were good friends up until very recently. So the country can't stand these people, and they're friends. Okay, now, the differences are also just as important. So one of these two very unpopular candidates was the nearly unanimous choice of her party's machinery, of the party apparatus, while the Democrats stood together, fended off the challenge from Bernie Sanders and whoever else, while the Republicans just fell apart. The Republican machine was not able to function at all. One of the two parties' machines simply crumbled, but the other one held fast. Hillary Clinton, if you think about it, a longtime Washington professional, right? She really knows how the system works. Secretary of State, U.S. Senator, First Lady, all through the 1990s. Donald Trump seems to have no idea how it's done, isn't even really sure what's in the Constitution, what isn't. Hillary is so polished, takes pains to never offend any group of voters, at least deliberately, right? She does so accidentally, but she tries so hard to never offend anyone. Trump does nothing but offend. That's what he does, right? That's how he's running for office. Hillary knows all about how a political campaign is how you reach out to this group and you court that demographic over there. You focus on the swing states. You do your micro-targeting and your big data. You manage the press. You run your ground game. You get people to the polls on election day. All of this, the complicated stuff that goes into running a modern political campaign. And Trump seems to have no idea. Just blurts out whatever comes to mind. It's all some kind of celebrity showdown. He thinks the results are going to be determined by everyone calling in 1-800 make us great again or something like that. Look, folks, by all rights, this should be a world-class blowout, right? A landslide in the making, and yet it's still weirdly kind of close. I can't get over the fact that Donald Trump will win any state at all, and he's going to win this state, by the way, and he's going to win Kansas. Do you think he's not? I bet he does. And it blows my mind that that's going to happen. Let alone that he still has even the slightest chance of winning the whole thing. And weirdest of all is that the reason that he's doing as well as he is, the reason that he had this movement that looked so formidable for so much of the year. Remember, a billionaire who is famous for firing people. The reason he was doing so well at one time is because he had the enthusiastic support of the white working class, a demographic group that is watching its way of life fall apart. Now think about this for a second. This is a group of voters that was once not just democratic, but profoundly democratic, right? The needs and desires of this group of people, of white working class voters, were what made the Democratic Party what it is, or I should say what it used to be. And serving working people is why you even had a Democratic Party. This is why you had a New Deal. This is why Franklin Roosevelt won 4 terms in the White House. And now these people are lining up with billionaire Donald Trump. What is going on in the world? Now, let me reframe the question a little bit. Let me put it this way. How is it that so many working class Americans decided to support this guy? How did Democrats lose the favor of this essential group, this group that was once so essential to how they understood themselves? Because what I want to suggest tonight is that the answer is that the degree to which the Republicans won these people over is the same degree to which the Democrats have abandoned them. Okay? And I think that this is the year to ask, whatever happened to the party of the people? I mean the question in 2 ways. First of all, how did the Democrats come to abandon working people, the great middle class of this country? And in a related point, why have they failed to respond to what I think is the greatest issue of our time? What am I talking about when I say the greatest issue of our time? President Obama himself has said, and I agree with him, he said that inequality is the defining challenge of our time. And that's a sweeping statement, of course. But you think about it for a couple of seconds and you realize it's not anywhere near sweeping enough. Okay? Inequality. This is, by the way, this is a word that I don't particularly like. It sounds too technical. It sounds, like it makes all our vast problems of managing the economy and society in this country, bring it down to a question of, turning the knobs back in D.C. and fixing everything. And it's not that simple. But it's the word that we use, inequality, so I'm going to stick with it. It's a kind of shorthand, I think, for all the things that have gone to make the lives of the rich so much more delicious year on year for the last 3 decades. And at the same time, it's shorthand for all the things that have made the lives of working people so wretched and so precarious at the same time. Inequality. What does it mean? Well, you see it in the ever-rising cost of healthcare and college, in the coronation of Wall Street, and this slow blighting of vast reaches of the Midwest. You catch a glimpse of inequality every time you hear about, somebody that had to declare bankruptcy when one of their kids got sick, or when you read about the lobbying industry that drives Washington, D.C., or the new, apparently constitutional requirement we have in this country that our presidential candidates must either be billionaires' favorites or else billionaires themselves. So inequality, folks, is about the way that speculators and even criminals get a helping hand from Uncle Sam while the Vietnam vet who lives down the street from you loses his house. Inequality is the reason that some people find such incredible significance in the ceiling height of an entrance foyer or the hop content of a beer, while other people will never believe in anything again. Inequality, folks, is a euphemism for the Appalachification of our world. Now I know, I've written many books about this, and I know that the Republicans are the ones who bear the primary responsibility for this plutocracy that we live in these days. These are the guys that launched the nation on its modern era of tax cutting and wage suppressing. I know that. These are the guys who made a religion out of the free market and fought so ferociously to open up our politics to the influence of money at every level. But listen, just blaming the Republicans one more time and turning the TV set back to MSNBC, folks, is not good enough. Not anymore. Because the things that I'm describing represent a failure of the Democratic Party as well. Okay? Protecting the middle class used to be the Democratic Party's traditional mission. And you take, someone like Harry S. Truman, Lyndon Johnson, Franklin Roosevelt, someone like that, and you put them down in the situation that we're in today with inequality out of control, Wall Street running wild, these guys would have known exactly what to do about this situation. Now I know old-style Democrats were screwed up in all sorts of ways. They did lots of things wrong. Vietnam War, they had their faults. But they were really, really, really good at defending the middle-class society. This is something they were expert at doing. And, but our modern Democrats, when it comes to tackling the defining challenge of our time, our modern Democratic leaders falter. They acknowledge that inequality is rampant and that it's awful, right? And they cry great big tears about it. But they can't find the conviction or the imagination to do what is necessary to reverse it. And instead they offer us the same kind of high-minded policy platitudes that they have been dishing up since the 1980s. They tell us, you know what they say, that folks, there's nothing anybody can do about technology, right? Or globalization, right? Globalization, that's the hand of God. Reaching down to human affairs and reorganizing our lives as he sees fit, right? And so what do the Democrats do? They promise us, you know what they promise? Charter schools, more job training. Oh, they'll shovel out the student loans, right? But other than that, folks, they got nothing. Now, I want to start with the issue of, we're halfway through. What am I saying? I want to get into the issue of the Wall Street bailouts back in 2009, okay, which is really, I think, the foundational event, the great historic event of our dumb century, such as it is. We're 16 years in here, and I think that was the turning point. That was the most important moment, was the financial crisis, economic collapse, and the bailout of Wall Street. This is the moment where our country could easily have changed course. The times were asking us, begging us to change course, and we didn't do it. Think about what it was like. This is 8 years ago now, folks. And President Obama was elected in this kind of massive wave of hope and enthusiasm, and I was one of the hopeful ones. I was one of the enthusiastic ones. And he was swept into the presidency with this, incredible idealism behind him. And he proceeded then to continue the policies of President Bush towards Wall Street, basically unchanged. What I mean by that is that no big banks ever got put into receivership, no bailouts were ever unwound, no elite bankers were ever prosecuted. So Obama and his Democrats refused to change course when every sign was telling them to turn. When it would have been good policy for the country to turn. When it would have been overwhelmingly popular for the country to turn. I mean, when the country fully expected him to swing the wheel. And when I say the country, I mean Wall Street too. Remember that incident early on in his term where the Wall Street bankers were summoned down to Washington. They met with him in the White House. And you look at their faces, they go into the meeting, and they're ashen-faced, right? They know what's going to happen to them. They're being taken to the woodshed. You know, it's 1933 all over again. And when they come out, hey, big smiles. You know, nothing changed. Nothing happened. And this is the important point, is that it was also fully within President Obama's power at that point, in 2009, fully within his power to steer the country in different directions. Now, we just went through, in the Democratic Party, they went through a primary, you know, Hillary Clinton versus Bernie Sanders, and it was supposed to be idealism versus pragmatism. But on this critical issue of Wall Street and the banks, and what to do about Wall Street, there's no conflict between pragmatism and idealism. The idealistic thing is also the practical thing, and it was also the healthy thing, and it was also the popular thing. The public was demanding it, but our leaders chose not to do it. Now, I know, as I said before, I know that Democrats are the good guys, right, or the less bad guys, or something like that. But it is not a coincidence that when you choose a policy like what I just described, it's not a coincidence that almost all of the economic gains of the recovery that we've had since then, right, presided over by a Democratic president, by a man that we're often told is the most liberal of all possible presidents, that all of the economic gains of this recovery have gone to the already wealthy. And this is not, or I should say not only, because sinister Republicans keep thwarting the righteous liberal will. I know how Republicans are. I live in Washington. I watch how they play the game. These guys play for keeps. They're very, very good at it, right? They believe in obstruction. It's a kind of personal philosophy, right? But that's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm describing is a straight-up democratic failure. Barack Obama, and we have to get our heads around this, folks, Barack Obama played this issue the way he did because that's how he wanted to play it. Okay? We have to face this squarely and try to understand it. Now, I called this a failure, but you know what the right word for it is. This is a betrayal. And the history of this betrayal goes back a long way. It doesn't start in 2009 with Wall Street banks. It goes back a long way. When I was young, when I was in college, when I was your age, the Democratic Party, this is back in the 80s, the Democratic Party used to always be fighting with itself, always grappling with itself, with Democrats fighting like cats and dogs over who they were and what they stood for. And it went on for decades, all through the 70s, all through the 80s, right up into the 90s. And you had all these different factions within the party, fighting, but they always agreed on one thing that they all agreed on, and that was this. Democrats, they said, had to turn away from the legacy of the New Deal with its fixation on working class people. Okay? They fought over everything else, but they all agreed on that. The New Deal had to come to an end. Now, the man who brought closure to that Democratic Civil War, all of this infighting in the Democratic Party, it all comes to an end when Bill Clinton becomes president in 1993. He brought a new kind of Democratic administration to Washington. And I think if we want to understand what has gone wrong with our system, why choices simply aren't on the table anymore, why our leaders refuse to turn when every sign is telling them to turn, what's gone wrong with the system, this is the period that we have to look back to, the years of the Bill Clinton administration. He comes to Washington in 1993. And rather than doing what every Democrat before him had done, this is what Democrats used to always do, they would pay homage to the policies of Franklin Roosevelt and try to remind people of what Roosevelt was like. They would sing "Happy Days Are Here Again." They didn't sing it, but you know how they were. They would. He did the opposite. Okay, Clinton would do these. He did these amazing favors for Franklin Roosevelt's old enemies, or he did these favors for banks, for the networks, for the power companies, for the bosses, basically. He deregulated Wall Street. He ensured that derivative securities would be traded without supervision of any kind. It's an amazing thing. He deregulated radio, deregulated telecoms. He basically put an end to the federal welfare system in 1996. And then something most people don't know about was that in the year after that, in 1997, Bill Clinton arrived at a secret deal with Newt Gingrich to privatize Social Security, which was, of course, the crowning achievement of the New Deal, the Franklin Roosevelt administration. And, he and Newt had a series. This is, by the way, it's not secret anymore. It's been written about in all sorts of places. It's well known. Some historian interviewed the various participants in the strategy sessions, and he and Newt sat down and figured it all out. They had it worked out what the policy would entail. They had a timetable. They figured out how they were going to introduce it. Clinton would kick it off. They would talk about it back, but they'd set up a commission, and then they would pass it during a lame duck session, like 1998. And in fact, Clinton took the first step. Nobody remembers this. He took the first step in his State of the Union address in 1998, talking about, he had some code word for it. Save Social Security first, or something like that. That was their phrase for what they were going to do, privatize the system. And right around that time, the Monica Lewinsky scandal broke, and that was the end of his fine dream, If you ask me, she's something of a hero. So put her on a postage stamp. So Clinton is a fascinating man in all sorts of ways. One of the ways is when he was running for the presidency in 1992, in that first race, he had a strategy as presidential candidate where he would go out of his way to insult or distance himself from some traditional Democratic constituency, and in this way assure the public that he was his own man. The most famous example, if you remember that election, the election of '92, you'll remember this immediately. The most famous example is when he contrived to insult Jesse Jackson to his face while the cameras were rolling. They called this the Sister Soldier moment, and it was a famous episode at the time. And the logic behind it was that groups like these typical Democratic constituencies, these traditional Democratic groups, that they now had, in the popular phrase at the time, nowhere else to go. Okay, what was Jesse Jackson going to do? Endorse the Republican? No, we knew that wasn't going to happen. So the idea was they have nowhere else to go. Bill Clinton can treat them however he wants, and there's nothing they can do about it. Now, what's weird is that as he becomes president, you see this campaign tactic morph into a philosophy of governance for this guy, right? Body slamming the very people that had just got you elected. And the classic example here, and one that has come back to bite Democrats this year in particular, the classic example is the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA. If you remember, this was negotiated by the Republicans, by George Bush Sr. George Bush's dad was also president. I don't know if you're aware of this. And they negotiated this treaty, but they couldn't get it passed through Congress because Congress was controlled by Democrats of sort of old school, and they were never going to pass this thing. So it took Bill Clinton. He swept into Washington, had Rahm Emanuel at his side. They set up a war room, and they got this thing done. And of course, it was by steamrolling organized labor. So this was organized labor was fighting against this thing, NAFTA. And Clinton, and they were, of course, huge supporters of the Democratic Party at the time, and Clinton rolled right over them. Now, this is very interesting. It's similar to what he did to Jesse Jackson, but it's also kind of different, because when he did this, he wasn't just insulting his friends in organized labor. Think about what he was doing. He was conniving in their ruin. Okay? He was assisting in the destruction of their economic power. He was doing his part to undermine his own party's greatest traditional ally. And to ensure, and this is what NAFTA did, this is one of the reasons people hate it, that henceforth, in any kind of conflict between management and labor, management always has the upper hand. Once NAFTA is passed, they can always threaten to move the plant to Mexico, right? They can always threaten to move it anywhere else. It's like they've got the atom bomb in their back pocket, right? And labor workers have nothing nothing like that, of course. And so they can use this to respond to any grievance that workers have. And we know that they do it all the time. They're constantly threatening to move the plant to Mexico if workers don't, put up and shut up. It happens all the time. And sometimes they even follow through on it, as you know, what happened in Indianapolis a little while ago. So what I'm saying here is that when he got NAFTA done, Clinton made the problems of working people, his voters, materially worse. And NAFTA is fascinating in all sorts of different ways. I went back, so I'm writing Listen Liberal, I went back and read a lot of the debates over NAFTA and how people thought about it, how people argued over it. And it was as close to a straight-up class issue as we ever see in this country, okay? And it gives us an idea about how the Democratic Party was changing and who our modern-day Democrats need to please, okay? So professionals and the wealthy were very much in favor of NAFTA, and working people were opposed to it, by and large. And there's also an educational divide, okay? So people with graduate degrees tend to be, and professionals were always very much in favor of it. People who had just had a high school diploma tended to be against it. And you had moments like, there's this time when you had 283 economists jointly signing a statement declaring that the treaty was going to increase exports and increase manufacturing employment in the United States. And you still see things like that to this day, by the way. There's always these mass signing of documents and open letters and stuff. There's one for the Trans-Pacific Partnership that you can find online where it's a whole bunch of, in this case, former diplomats, I believe, and mass signing the Trans-Pacific Partnership that say it's the greatest thing in the world. Now, ironically, the predictions of the unlettered blue-collar workers who opposed NAFTA turned out to be far more accurate, what was actually going to come to pass, than did the rosy scenarios of all those economists and of the Rhodes Scholar who was then sitting in the Oval Office. But here's the point that I want to get to. So, New Democrats, this is the faction that Bill Clinton came out of, his supporters within the Democratic Party. They looked at what he had done with NAFTA, getting it passed over the opposition of organized labor, over the opposition of working people. And they said, this is not just a good thing that he's done. This is a great thing. This is his finest moment. This is like a Churchillian stand that he made. This is what he'll always be remembered for, what he did with NAFTA. There's a lot of kind of talk about Bill Clinton in this vein from that period. I was reading a biography of him that came out in 1996. It was a campaign biography. He was reelected in 1996. This one by a British journalist who said that, and he said, yes, Clinton has some failings here and there. He's got some things wrong. But he said that his failings were, and this is a quote from the book, his failings were in the end balanced and even outweighed by his part in finally sinking the untenable old consensus of the New Deal and the crafting of a new one. Let's think about that for a second. This is why they liked him. Because he killed the New Deal. Okay? This is why his admirers admired him. This is what they liked about him. Now, that author also mentioned the crafting of a new consensus. What did he mean by that? Who were the heroes of this new Democratic Party that was emerging from the ashes? Well, the same Democratic thinkers that I described earlier, who were always saying you have to abandon the New Deal, these people had the answer. And what Democrats had to embrace, they said, in the 1990s, was the emerging post-industrial economy. And the people, specifically the people that Democrats had to identify with, were the winners in this new economic order. The highly educated professionals who populate our innovative knowledge industries, by which I mean, what I mean by professionals. Well, there's a whole lot of us here in the room, people with PhDs, lawyers, doctors, but you also see in the 80s and 90s this big explosion of the population of professionals. It's a category that is growing by leaps and bounds. And you see people like math PhDs who work on Wall Street writing derivative securities, biochemists who work for big pharma making prescription drugs. These people are professionals. And if you go back to the 1950s and you look at this group in the Eisenhower era, they were very solid Republicans. It's one of the most Republican groups in America. Today, they are the most Democratic. So they've completely changed. They've completely changed from one side to the other. And that's who the Democrats are today. They're the party of basically the people that made up the Eisenhower era Republican Party. The party of the highly educated professional class. The Democrats have other constituencies today, of course. We know about this, right? Minorities, women, the young. They have a term for their coalition in Washington. They call it the Coalition of the Ascendant. But in that coalition, professionals are always the ones who come first. These are the ones whose technocratic way of looking at the world always prevails, right? It's professionals' taste and manners that are always celebrated by liberal newspapers. And it's their particular way of regarding things that's taken for granted by liberals as being objectively and obviously true, right? So what I'm saying is that professionals today dominate liberalism and the Democratic Party in the same way that Ivy Leaguers dominate the Obama cabinet. You go and look at where the educational pedigree of his advisors. You'll see what I'm talking about. Now, Democrats have, if you read their party literature, magazines, books, this kind of thing, they have all of these wonderful, flattering terms for their favorite demographic. All of these, sort of terms of endearment that they apply to the professional class. They call these high-achieving people the wired workers who will inherit the future. They're supposed to be a learning class that truly gets the power of education, right? They're creative class. You've heard this one. They're the creative class that naturally rebels against fakeness and conformity. And then there's one that I just learned about a little while ago, an innovation class, right? An innovation class that just can't stop coming up with awesome new things. But wait, think about that for a second. Back up. A learning class. Who would ever use a term like this? I mean, we study sociology here. We know what the working class is, but what's the learning class? Okay, but now think about Democratic leaders themselves, because they tend to be drawn almost exclusively from the ranks of this very same group. Think about the life stories of Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Hillary Clinton. All of your Democratic leaders of recent years, all of them, plucked from obscurity by prestigious universities. And for all of these people, the time that they spent at these really, really fancy schools is what defines them as individuals. This is what makes them who they are. Think about Bill Clinton, right? He's a kid from very humble origins in Hot Springs, Arkansas. He goes to Georgetown University, becomes a Rhodes Scholar. Right? He goes to Yale Law School, and the doors of the world open up for this guy. Right? He meets Hillary at Yale Law School, where she had just gone to Wellesley College. But it's the same story with all of these people. Barack Obama, Columbia University, Harvard Law School. Harvard Law Review, became a professor at the University of Chicago, where I met him. Okay, but let me summarize. Okay, we'll talk about that later. But, okay, think about what I'm saying here. So, this class of people. So Democrats look at this class of people, the creative class or the learning class or whatever they call them, and they see the heroes of history, the winners of our new economic order. It's kind of like an inverse Marxism, where you've got this group that's standing at the end of history. They're the triumphant ones standing there after the dialectic has done its work. These are the, but it's not the proletariat, right? It's not the proletariat, it's the creative class, right? So that's their way of looking at the world. These are the winners of history. They also are the number one constituency of the Democratic Party, and all of our recent Democratic leaders happen to be drawn from the ranks of this very same group. So this is what I'm talking about here, this shift of allegiance from the traditional working class or middle class, what they used to be in like the days of Harry S. Truman or something like that, the shift of allegiance from those people to professionals. This is what explains so much that is vexing and annoying about our modern day Democrats. Go back to the problem that I started with, the problem of Obama and the Wall Street banks. Why did Team Obama fail to do what was obviously necessary with these guys? Why did they, why didn't they come down hard? Why did they come down like a ton of bricks on Citibank or J.P. Morgan or you name it, any of these outfits, right? Why did they do that? Why did they declare that Wall Street executives were going to be held to a different legal standard than ordinary criminals? And they did declare that. The man who said it had to resign like as soon as it came out, but he said it, right? We know that's what they were thinking. Why did these guys choose Wall Street over average Americans again and again and again and again? Because, folks, for the achievement-conscious people who fill the Obama administration, investment bankers are more than friends. These people are peers. These people are classmates. These people are colleagues. The two groups are basically the same. The people at the top of the Treasury Department, the people running J.P. Morgan or whatever it is, and people go back and forth through the revolving door. One year they're working at Goldman Sachs, the next year they're running Hillary's campaign or whatever it is. There is no difference. The revolving door spins and spins, and there is no difference. People in the Treasury Department or in the Cabinet or the Council of Economic Advisors, they look at Wall Street and they see, people of subtle minds and sophisticated jargon. And they love that jargon, right? And there's extraordinary powers of innovation, right? They're writing these fancy derivative securities, exactly the sort of creative individuals the Democratic Party theory tells us we must honor and respect, right? These financial instruments that they're writing up there in New York, they're so incredibly, so admirably complex. So when I was writing this book, when I was writing Listen Liberal, the book that I'm talking about here, I have a friend in Kansas City who is an old school bank regulator, like old-fashioned bank regulator, and he had a hand in prison a great number of savings and loan executives in the 70s and 80s. He prosecuted bankers. That's what he did for a living. Okay, and he told me that when bank regulators like him in the old days would be looking over a bank's books, and they would see what he calls undue financial complexity, they'd be like, aha. Zero in on that fraud, right? We got something here, that raises a red flag. But when our modern Democrats see this stuff, what do they say? You know what they say? Sophistication, right? This is admirable. This is something I think is so awesome. It's mind-blowing, right? It's financial rocket science, as one Obama administration official called it. And he said that, by the way, as part of in explaining why they weren't prosecuting these guys. It's financial rocket science, dude. No one understands. And it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same for Big Pharma, right? So innovative. Big Pharma. You don't import generic pharmaceuticals. No. You protect Pfizer. You protect these innovative companies. And folks, mega dittos for Silicon Valley, right? This is an industry that can do no wrong in democratic eyes. I mean, so lovable, so professional, so creative, that for this one industry, the enforcement of our country's antitrust laws has basically been suspended. For this one industry, right? Bow down before Uber, they tell us, right? The company that is rewriting the social contract of this nation as we speak. When Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, by the way, I saw a speech by Hillary the other day where she was complaining that the media focuses on trivial things and silly things and scandal, and they never talk about policy. And she's right, they never do. So I went back and studied Hillary's policies as Secretary of State. She had two important ones. I'm going to talk about one of them right now. She called it Internet freedom. She was Secretary of State, and her great foreign policy invention was Internet freedom. You know what she meant by this? She meant that access to certain Silicon Valley servers, Facebook, Google, that kind of thing, access to these servers was a fundamental human right. Okay? That was the foreign policy of our country, folks. Where's that water, by the way? So, a party of the professionals. What does a party of professionals believe in? What does it look like? What's its philosophy? Well, the first item on the list is, of course, meritocracy. the idea that the successful deserve their rewards, right? And that people on top are up there on top because they are the best. Okay? This is the first commandment of the professional class. When you do these sociological studies of professionals, this is the thing that people believe in. Everybody gets what they deserve, and what they deserve is defined by how they did in school. Okay? That's the philosophy. Now, meritocracy, you guys are educated people. You know this is wrong in about 100 different ways. Okay? But I submit to you that where it is wrongest is as a way of taking on the problem of inequality. Okay? This is not a doctrine for mitigating inequality. This is a way of rationalizing inequality. This is a way of brushing it off. It is the exact opposite idea. And here's the point that I want you to take away from what I'm saying tonight. There is no solidarity in a meritocracy. It's exactly the opposite idea. Meritocracy and solidarity are opposites. Okay? This is the shift in the Democratic Party from one value to the other, or from one set of values to the other. There's no solidarity in a meritocracy. Now, when I say that, people at the top of the professional classes, say people working for the Treasury Department, people on Wall Street, people at the big banks in New York, right? These people have this incredible respect and deference for one another at the top. But they feel very, very little, I would say zero, sympathy for members of their own disciplines who are lower down in the hierarchy. Okay? If any of you have ever worked in a white-collar workplace, you know what I'm talking about. When someone gets fired, the other workers don't all get together and say, we got to do something about this, right? We're going to go on strike, or we're going to go yell at the boss or something. No, they never do that. They always figure he had it coming. Or you look at the problem that is very close to, well, the problem that I dealt with in my lifetime, which was, I got a PhD once. I'm a member of this class. And when I came out of graduate school, the tenure-track jobs had largely, this is in the mid-90s, tenure-track jobs had largely evaporated, disappeared in this country, and you had to become an adjunct. And this is, we could all see what this meant for the humanities disciplines. I mean, this is a disaster that they're doing this to young PhDs. The people just coming out of graduate school, they have to go work at these very low-wage jobs. The job market has been completely casualized for these people. And yet the people on top of our disciplines, the people who still had some amount of power within the university system, didn't care. There is no solidarity in a meritocracy. That life doesn't shower its blessings on people who can't make the grade isn't a shock or an injustice in this world. It's the way things are supposed to be. That's what they think. I know the story I've told tonight is a happy, inspiring. But I'm kind of serious about this. And think about it. This is a return to the 19th century. This is a return to the golden age. This is the coming together of money and merit, of success and righteousness. Go to the Democratic Convention. I was there, and you've got all of this righteousness signaling, and all of this virtue talk. Everybody on the platform is so good. Hillary Clinton herself wore a white suit, like Joan of Arc. And up there in the skyboxes are the guys from Blackstone Management, right? The guys from Wall Street, the guys from J.P. Morgan, the guys from Goldman are up there. It's the coming together of, finance with political virtue. And folks, virtue and righteousness are what being a liberal is all about these days. But in another sense, what I have just described, the transformation of the Democrats that I just described, is a disaster. Think about it this way. Left parties all over the world were founded about 100 years ago in order to advance the fortunes of working people. That's why they exist. Okay? But our left party here in America, one of our two monopoly parties, remember, and we'll get back to that, I hope, in the question period, problem of monopoly parties. But our left party here in America has chosen over the last 30 years to turn its back on working people and their concerns and make itself instead into the tribune of the enlightened professional class, creative class, that makes these fine, innovative things like derivative securities and smartphone apps. And the working people that the party used to care about, Democrats figured, had nowhere else to go. The classic 90s era expression. Well, folks, that's the story of this year. They have found somewhere else to go. Okay? By abandoning these people, Democrats have made inevitable both the economic desolation that you see whenever you drive around the Midwest. When you go over to Chicago or the South Side, Gary or Hammond or any of these places. They've made that inevitable, as well as making inevitable a populist backlash against liberalism that has been building for decades and decades. And 12 years ago, I wrote about what it looked like in my home state of Kansas. Well, folks, today it is everywhere. It's all over the country now. The backlash is swarming up out of the deindustrialized zones, screaming its bizarre Trumpian slogans. Just think for a second about the choice that our two-party system gives us this year. Angry, right-wing intolerance on one hand, and on the other, inequality forever. Folks, there has got to be a different way. Thank you very much.